Mark. Welcome to the Military to Management podcast, first episode. Thank you so much for being first guest. My name's Eamon Graziano, and we're both Marine Corps veterans, so really excited to talk to you today, and hopefully the end result is maybe helping at least one guy or gal getting out of the military and navigating that transition into corporate America. So thank you for being on here, and love to jump right
Absolutely.
into it. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. This is a great format. I think you got going, and like you said, it helps at least one.
Awesome. So without further ado, let's jump into it.
Yeah.
How about you tell us a little bit about your background, the branch you served in? I already had a little spoiler there. How long you were in? Any key, experiences that stood out for you?
Okay. Yeah. So like you said, I served in the Marine Corps. I retired from the Marine Corps. I did 27 years and 10 days. Not that we count, but yeah, the uh, interesting career path. But I wish there was some sort of noble reason for joining. But the truth is, dropped out of high school and needed a job. A buddy of mine was joining, and I looked into it, and then eventually got in. And I was in communications when I was enlisted, and during that time, discovered that maybe I should probably get some education. Went to college on my own, got a degree, got commissioned, stayed in communication, and then evolved over time. And I joined in '80s, so that comm was radio, and data was virtually non-existent. As we evolved, that became data and IT. So that's where I landed towards the end of the career, and working in IT. So had honestly, I had a really unique career. I was able to do a lot of cool things being in that field. Just got to a serve in those capacities in comm, but also I was a Marine Officer Instructor, MOI. I ran ROTC for the University of Mississippi. Phenomenal duty. Just really great opportunity for leadership to inspire young men and women to be Marine Corps and Navy officers. Got to do some really challenging technical stuff. I worked for Marine Corps Systems Command, which is the acquisitions workforce for the Marine Corps, and then Marine Corps Tactical Systems Support Activity, MCTSA, was like the technical arm for that. So got to work for them. And one of the dreams I had as a comm officer is I wanted to be a MEU commo, the Marine Expeditionary Unit communications officer. The Marine Corps and just changed its timing for promotions, and you had to be a major, and I was not. I even had the commanding officer of the MEU for the Marine Corps by name select me, which is a great honor in one sense. But then the promotion timelines changed. It wasn't anything that I did personally or professionally. Just times changed, and so I was no longer eligible. But then in the Marine Corps' unique fashion of accomplishing things, I circled back and became the MEU officer for MCTSA and got to go on every single MEU, all 7 of them, for nice short deployments of a week or two instead of 6 months. So uh, got the better of the deal, in my opinion. Got to do that, so that was fun, and was able to yeah, just some fun stuff. I mean, honestly, got to go to combat. That sometimes that's just what Marines want to do. We join because we want to go fight, and I was able to do that. Spent a year in Fallujah, Iraq. Got a nice souvenir I brought home, with a couple of metal pieces got stuck in my head there. Uh, got to be like personal security for some dignitaries, if you will. That was another fun thing. I tell people I actually, my roommate was Neil Armstrong for 12 days because we basically lived on a plane. Him among others, like he was one of the legends of aerospace. It was one of those USO tours. It wasn't done by the USO. It was done by another organization that kind of took people around the Middle East during combat to try and entertain the troops. And this was Neil Armstrong, Jim Lovell from Apollo 13, Tom Hanks's character, um, Gene Cernan, the last man on the moon. Typical robust Texan astronaut, the guy who drove the Land Rover on the moon. Just some really cool opportunities throughout my career.
Wow, that's incredible. Your career super cool. I mean, when we met and we talked briefly, I didn't realize the extent of it. I thought I was cool being in 6 years, but 27 years and with a ton of awesome experiences. Thank you for that, and incredible, incredible career. Based on that career, what would you say are some of the biggest lessons or values that you took from those 27 years, or like leadership, takeaways from that time?
Sure. Something that really stands out is, you learned over time, or maybe just learned early, just doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, not just for recognition. You learn that, just by maintaining your integrity and doing what's right and getting a job well done without seeking that recognition. It's just something that I did throughout my career. And I had a boss one time when I was a lieutenant, and she's a three-star general now, just an amazing officer. Just like, hey, at first when I first heard her say this, I thought she was being super selfish because she's like, hey, your job is to do whatever you can to make me look good, and then give your Marines the credit. I thought, well, that's, as it sinks in, it's like, okay, it's not her seeking recognition. That wasn't the case. But it was, I got it, right? You just work really hard to make your boss look good in whatever field you're in, right? And then give your team the credit. And if everyone does that, we're all working towards, a common goal of making the organization or the individual, whether it's the CEO or whoever, let's say look good, meaning, hey, they're trying to accomplish something for their organization or their business. Do what you can to make them successful, and then you just give your team the credit. It played out pretty well for me.
I love that. I love that. There's like a little bit of like a maturity arc there too, where at first you're like, oh, is this person being selfish? And then you realize
Yeah,
kind of the bigger picture, which, yeah, I mean, if everybody in the world acted in that way, I think productivity for sure would skyrocket, and probably some other good things too.
sure.
So, what was 27 years in? Obviously, that's a huge chunk of your life, especially at that point. What was your transition from the Marines to, the civilian sector like? Were there challenges that you had to overcome? Was there like a moment that you maybe thought, what am I doing? What's going on? Like, tell me a
Right.
little bit about that.
It was challenging. I didn't realize it at the time. So uh, I I had the experience. I had done some, kind of mentioned some really cool stuff, both personally and professionally. I was educated and trained. The Marine Corps sent me to grad school. I got a master's in IT management. So, and I'd worked in comm slash IT, basically my entire adult life. So my thought was it's not going to be a problem. Did see kind of the typical, I say typical air quotes, path of retiring officers moving into, not even just officers, just any military professionals, kind of sticking with government, right? So going to a Lockheed or a General Dynamics or something like that, just to kind of smooth the transition, if you will. So it's familiar. You're continually working with the military, but you're not in the military. So you get that satisfaction of being out, but then you got your comfort zone. You're staying in. I intentionally didn't want to go that route. I felt, hey, I've got the background, I've got the experience, I've got the education. I'm gonna try something different, and move away from the typical, right? For no other reason than maybe just proving something to myself or others that, hey, I don't have to take that, again, air quotes, typical path. So I started, seeking companies, looking for like IT manager or director roles. Was actually at a job fair, so I was kind of poking around, and I follow different online things on LinkedIn, and went to a job fair. I don't remember the company's name, but I'm standing in line and got my suit on, got my little portfolio with my resume, and waiting to talk to these people who are doing some pretty cool international stuff because I did like international. And while I'm standing in line, this woman in a purple T-shirt is coming up and going, "Hey, how are you? What are you doing here?" And I'm just like trying to focus. I'm like, "Hey, I'm good. How are you?" Right? But leave me alone kind of attitude. It's like this is I'm trying to go over here to talk to this gentleman about a job, and she's like, "Yeah, oh, cool. So so you got a background in IT," and she keeps talking, and I said, "Can I come talk to you when I'm done over here?" I tried not to be rude, but I think I was. And eventually, I find out she's like a regional IT manager for Amazon. They're just very casual but extremely professional, organization. Obviously, this is again 2012, so 13 years ago. So I finished with the little conversation I was intending to have, and I go and talk to, the Amazon folks, really welcoming, very, their questions and kind of pre-interview, if you will, were very pointed. Things I was able to talk through and answer. And then they set me up for an interview. And then, I think it was 7 interviews later. Amazon does some pretty long interviews, two of which were, a panel with 3 or 4 other people, and pretty intense, to be honest. Then I landed it as an IT manager at Amazon I was hired before I even retired. So I was able to have a job waiting for me when I got out, which was, it's really nice to have that comfort level, right? I mean, pension's nice, but it's effectively half of what you were making. So you're not getting rich, right? So having that lined up. So that was my long story into how I landed in an IT job at Amazon. Big name, right? So I thought, okay, this is going to be great.
Big name, great for people getting out of the military, but in a lot of aspects, at least I never worked for Amazon, but from what I've heard, is it's almost like it's another duty station. So I guess my question to you is seamless transition out, or when you were at Amazon, like what did you think about that experience? And tell me a little bit about how your path took you from Amazon to where you currently are.
Sure. So Amazon was for my professional, it was infrastructure. So it was building a wireless network inside a 1 million square foot warehouse, and I had fairly intelligent individuals working for me. So it was a good team. There were some, that, Marine Corps, we always say you got your 10%. So there's, a few folks that maybe should not have been hired, we find out later. And of course you work through that transition. It was, so I was able to learn a lot, had some really good folks there to help kind of show the ropes, but I was also able to help kind of build and grow a team that actually was doing what, I needed them to do so that I could, again, make my boss look good. Um, I will say I spent a lot of time in HR, so that that professional transition was a little different. Now, it wasn't anything crazy, or at least I didn't think so, but it was, I remember one incident where my night shift guy, because and all right, to provide some context, Amazon, as you know, it's a fulfillment, right? You buy stuff, it gets in a warehouse. I worked in the warehouse, so it was the infrastructure for those warehouses, what they call fulfillment centers. 1 million square feet, it's enormous, and every employee in there that's going in there picking up product has a wireless scanner. They have to have connectivity to dip into the database that Amazon uses to track their inventory, which is impressive in its own right. So again, there's hundreds of Amazon employees inside this warehouse with these wireless scanners that have to connect to the internet, our network, dip into the database and the inventory management system, know where all the stuff. So it's a pretty extensive IT infrastructure, big. So we got to keep it going. That role didn't report to the general manager of that warehouse. I reported through my IT chain, but I'm there to support them. He was an Army vet, which was kind of cool. So we kind of had, a little military background in common, and we got along really well. But he was creative and aggressive, like most leaders in Amazon are. Just wanted more, right? So anyway, so that's the context. So my night shift guy, it's like, hey, here's a few things that we need accomplished overnight while you're here. Come back the next day and it isn't done. And had a little conversation, and he was saying, well, yeah, I went, and did this, but that didn't work, so I did that. And I'm like, huh. So I bring up the video of there's cameras everywhere. It's like, that's not exactly what you said at all. You basically you're lying to me. So it was one of those shut the door, sit down, get up kind of close to him and said, hey, if you don't want to work here, that's okay. Go home. In fact, I don't need you here now. You can just go ahead and leave, right? I'm not going to pay you not to work, right? HR didn't like that. You can't say that. This incident, he reported to HR, sent an email to the vice president of HR, the guy who reported to Jeff Bezos. Marine Corps chain of command, if you request mass and file a complaint to your senior level or write a letter to the commanding general or something like that, that's going to trickle down, to finally get to your first sergeant and you're standing on the red carpet getting reamed, right? So very similarly, it gets that high it makes its way down, and I'm standing in front of all these folks going, hey, you can't do that. So that was my introduction to the HR. Marine Corps, we don't have HR. You have your first sergeant, right? So that was one of many experiences I had with dealing with employees and trying to get them to perform to the level that I was used to with Marines performing. It was a quick lesson in civilian employees don't, I hate to put that stigma around it. It's not just civilians, but not everybody's a Marine, right? There's a reason why it's only 1%. Or pick your service, right? Generally speaking, our military members are high performers. That I wasn't experiencing that in my team. So you learn, and you kind of, at least I learned, and can filter those out and do better at hiring, and finally created a pretty strong team to be able to accomplish what we want. Got more buildings, so went from just that one fulfillment center to had all four of them in Phoenix at one time. So there was a lot of responsibility bouncing through buildings, and it was just a good learning experience. But like I said, spent a lot of time in HR. The one thing, and I've discovered that this was pretty common in a lot of corporations, where, and I don't even know if this would be admitted to by any leadership in Amazon, but I I had to fire 10% of my people every year. It was keeping the best of the best in the organization. And I struggled with that because I'm like, I promise you my bottom guy is better than your top guy, right? So just based on that conversation we just had, I'm going to hire better, I'm going to train better, my guys, my gals are going to be studs. And they were, in effect, right? So my worst employee, which wasn't a bad employee, was better than somebody else's team's employee. So the fact that it didn't matter that I had to get rid of, let's say if I had, 10 people on my team, I had to get rid of one every year, even though that one was better than, some of their best guys on other teams. So I struggled with that. So much so that even my boss's boss came down and says, well, if you don't get rid of them, you're fired.
Yeah, absolutely. Mark, thanks again for coming on and sharing your story. 27 years of service and everything you've done since is incredibly inspiring. I know there's a lot more we could dive into, but we'll wrap it up here for now. Really appreciate your time, and hopefully we can get you back on for a part two. For everyone listening, thanks for joining us on the Military to Management podcast. And until next time, stay focused, stay driven,